Excellent. We are live.
Subhadeep, you're on air.
Hello, and a very, very warm welcome to this episode of HT Auto. Here in this episode, we will once again try to get your answers related to automobiles answered, your questions answered from our expert, our in-house expert. We have once again with us Mr. Murad Ali Baig. He's an auto expert and an industry veteran, and he'll be taking on all the questions that you've sent to us over the last week. And if you have any questions, you can even write them here on the channels that you're watching this on. So without much ado, let's get this episode started. Murad, thank you once again for taking the time out and joining us.
Happy to join you.
Right. Murad, just to get things started, we've seen a lot of launches in this week, but in the luxury car space. We saw Mercedes coming out with the Maybach GLS, we have the Lamborghini Huracan coming out. We also have a few launches lined up the next week. So just to get things started, do you see a lot of movement in the luxury car space happening? And do you see that segment in particular taking the Indian auto industry forward, at least in the foreseeable future?
Well, it's a matter of relativity, actually, because the common garden, ordinary standard car, the 10 lakh and 5 lakh car, those cars are moving very slowly. But the richer segments of society have not been so badly hit by the COVID. They are still traveling abroad, they're still spending money, and therefore the big spenders are also bored out of their minds, and therefore they if they can't get a choice of a lot of different cars, they go for a lot of exotics. One of the new cars that have just been launched is, for example, it's not just a Maybach, it's a Maybach SUV. Now, the SUV market is the specialized area of the luxury car market. It's not like the S-Class Mercedes or the 7 Series BMW, which is the sleek saloon for the business magnates. The SUVs are for the young people. So it's not only high-end people, but it's the young, rich people who will be targeted for a thing like the Maybach.
Right. But that gets me to the first user question that we received, whether it's a luxury vehicle or it's a mass market vehicle. Car insurance seems to confuse us all. So the first question is coming in from Amit Mathur. He says, he asks, what is the role of declared value in car insurance? And how do we get maximum money for damage or loss case from the insurance agencies?
That's always a struggle. Because the insurance company, like chaps at the hospital, will try and get you to pay as minimum as to pay out as little as possible and pay and make you pay as much as possible. But anyway, the main point is you've got to check the policies which are there, and the basic structure is pretty much the same in all of them. But the important point is that when it comes to making the payment, the insurance people, particularly if it's a write-off or a substantial damage, they will look for faults. So therefore, it's very important to make sure that all your car is, as far as possible, fault-free. So therefore, all the main points in terms of scratch marks, bumpers, dents, etc., should be taken care of on a permanent basis. Your car should be spick and span, so that in the unhappy case of an accident, they can't find fault with what you're doing.
Right, but is it also a good idea to raise the value of the car, which in case there is something unfortunate that happens, will ensure that you get a higher payout from insurance agencies. But yes, you will also be paying more premium of a premium.
well, it doesn't depend on you so much. The insurance companies have their almost a rate slab, a whole ladder of prices which are given to each model according to the year, according to the model, etc., and therefore they try and see where they can. What's happening?
Right.
Yeah, I'm there.
Right. So Amit also has another question, which is not really related to insurance, but he asks, is it possible for us to change the original color of the vehicles we have? And if so, what is the legal procedure that is spelled out in the Indian law for us to do that?
The color is no big issue, but very few people change the color because the quality of the paint that you get from on a factory thing, which is a paint which goes through a paint dipping process and all the rest of it. In the when you change the color is never quite as good, and after a while these can fade. The original colors can come through slightly. So therefore, most people, unless they're extremely unhappy with a particular color, will basically stick with the color they've got. And I think many of them rather change the car rather than change the color.
Right, but Murad, you do have post-purchase modifications, people going for matte finish.
From the legal point of view, there's no barrier as far as I know.
All right, so no barriers as such. You can change the color of your car. But what happens to the insurance? Is there any implications when you are renewing your car insurance or you're going in for a claim?
The car registration doesn't bother much with the color. They look at the horsepower, the year of manufacture, the engine, etc., etc., etc. They're very particular about those, but they don't bother much about the color of the car.
All right, understood. The next question is coming from Vikas Kumar Pandey. He says, can you buy a manual and build, I believe he means customize and put a semi-automatic or IMT transmission. He specifically takes the example of I-20 and put it in a Ford. That's his question. Can you install a semi-automatic transmission in your manual transmission vehicle? And I personally would also want to know what your take is on semi-automatic transmission vehicles.
Sure. Well, the technologies are moving closer and closer together all the time. So therefore, at one time, there was a huge difference between a manual transmission and an automatic transmission. But the new technologies are coming all the time. And therefore, from a 3-speed automatic, you got to 4-speed automatic, to getting a 6-speed automatic. And then, of course, you've got a CTV, which is a continuously variable automatic, like you have on some of the cars, like on the Honda cars. And these so there are no gear shifts. It's a moving belt between pulleys which move up and down according to the speed and load of the car, and therefore it's continuously variable, and there are no jerks between one gear and the other. The movement from one gear to the other is not as distinct as it is with a conventional automatic gear. But the point is that nobody wants to have any jerks. Many of the hotel saloons, for example, are buying automatics because there are no jerks to the passenger. So, but my point is, you can't. I would strongly discourage anybody from trying to do a jugaad of putting a manual thing. Now, what do you call it? The manual automatic transmission, MTA, is basically only an electronic box which fits on top of a conventional gearbox, and therefore your car moves through the normal first, second, third, fourth gear, fifth gear, whatever it is, without actually where the electronic signals make the gears move instead of having to move it with a lever. But the fact is that theoretically, a very intelligent, very well equipped mechanic would probably be able to manage it. Technically, there's nothing that can't be done. But the fact of the matter is that it's extremely unwise to do it, because If you goof up on it, then you will have a lot of time and cost wasted in the process.
Right. So, because if you're watching, theoretically, the answer to your question is yes, it's possible. You need an extremely capable technician to do it. But the downside is just humongous. You lose the warranty of the vehicle, and the chances of it being messed up is just not worth it. So for now, we would recommend, if you really want to buy an INT vehicle, then you go for what is being offered by companies. Currently, Hyundai and Kia have it. But Ford, unfortunately, doesn't have it yet. So if you want to buy a Ford, you'll have to skip your preference for semi-automatic. Moving on to the next question. Nishant Patwa, he has a question about importing vehicles. So he wants to know, is there a law against importing older vehicles? And what is the procedure to follow for importing a car that's older than 3 years?
I'm not sure I'm up to date on that question. Earlier, there was a complete ban on it. I believe they have allowed it now, but the procedure is very, very complicated. You see, earlier the government was very bothered about the people bringing illegal imports and buying it cheaper in buying technically second-hand cars and selling it off as new. So, but now that is not an issue anymore. So I don't think the Customs Department are terribly bothered about it. But still, I think if you really are interested in importing a car, but the cars have always been subject to a lot of customs scrutiny. So it's not a very good idea to fool with it.
Right, and I'm not sure what sort of car, what segment, what category of car Nishant is referring to, but now you have the luxury car manufacturers at least even getting their high performance vehicles through the CBM route, possibly even making some of them in India as well. So if somebody is interested in a high-end, high performance vehicle, it can actually be purchased at reasonably affordable rates, comparatively affordable rates than ever before.
It can technically be imported with difficulty, but it's definitely going to be an expensive proposition and a time-consuming proposition.
Right. Right. So the next question is from Jagdish Singh. He wants to know, when buying a new car, is it really necessary to get the add-ons like Teflon coating, anti-rust coating that the dealerships push for? He also mentions that he stays in Mumbai, where it generally tends to rain very heavily and gets really humid.
Yeah. Well, waterproofing in the under the car, that means in the underbody of the car, is definitely a good idea, especially in coastal areas like Goa and Bombay, because there's not only the question of high moisture around the year, it's not just a question of monsoons. The entire year, the humidity level is very high. Number two, there's also, if you're close to the sea, there's also a salt thing, and the salt crust causes premature corrosion of the metal. So therefore, it's definitely desirable. But as far as the bodywork is concerned, it's definitely not necessary. But a hard waxing is usually enough, and I think a lot cheaper to have hard waxing about 2-3 times a year than to go for Teflon coating. But there's no harm in doing Teflon coating because it's a transparent thing that comes right, skin that's put that is sprayed on top of the body paint, and it is usually pretty good.
Right, but Murad, oftentimes there is the general opinion that these are more gimmicky rather than practical, and dealerships just tend to forcefully push it because somebody who's going in to take delivery of a new vehicle would want to take maximum care of the vehicle.
Protecting the paintwork and the underbody is something that you may like to invest in, but the things that the dealers usually push you for is things like having what you call extra seats, leather seats, etc., etc., etc. Now, when a car comes with this original fitting, sure, if you get the with leather seats, the top end fabric, it will be a bit rather more expensive than you've got it done in the market. But it is definitely fail-safe. The things that which will be where you probably get a better deal would be if you try to get your music system. But please also remember that the music systems and fiddling with electronics is also extremely dangerous. Because if your operator, your dealer, or your person who's fitting the stuff doesn't do it properly, you can get the entire car immobilized.
Right. Just coming back, leading back towards the question about Teflon coating and anti-rust coating, is it recommended for places like Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta, where it generally tends to rain a whole lot more than perhaps where I'm sitting here in Delhi? It doesn't rain all that much. Delhi roads are not all that waterlogged when specifically compared to, say, Mumbai. Would a buyer in Delhi, is he or she okay without even getting an anti-rust coating done?
Well, the monsoon damage, of course, is considerable. But the point is the atmospheric humidity in Calcutta or Bombay is high throughout the year. I mean, the humidity never goes down in Bombay or Goa or Cochin or Calcutta for that matter, or Madras for that matter. Chennai, sorry.
Yeah. Understood. So the crux of the answer to that last question is that you can't really go wrong with Teflon coating or anti-rust coating. It's not really entirely gimmicky. It has its practical use. And if you are someone who's staying in coastal cities like Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta, well, you're better off just getting it done. But Murad also warns against getting anything.
Antibody is safe enough. It's not something that is going to, you're not buying it because it looks good. You're buying it because it enhances the value and the long-term reliability of the vehicle itself.
All right. Murad, this one last question that is not from anyone in particular, but most of our readers tend to ask us whenever we do reviews for subcompact SUVs and sometimes even sedans. This whole debate about sedans and subcompact or mid-size SUVs that is emerging. We've seen subcompact SUVs from almost every OEM in the market, and around the same time, whether because of it or not, sales of sedans in India has fallen quite drastically. People generally tend to be very confused about they have a certain budget. In that budget, say 10 to 12 lakhs, should they opt for a sedan or should they go for a subcompact SUV, considering that their needs would be for a nuclear family?
Now, first of all, it must be understood that the so-called SUVs are oftentimes a misnomer, because actually these are not actual sports utility vehicles. There's nothing utility about most of the new compact SUVs. These are small sedans which have only got large wheels and a few other accessories there, so you can go on roughish roads. But you can't actually take it boulder bashing on a fishing trip or something. They're not really a rough road vehicle like the Mahindra Thar, for example. You could take almost anywhere, but you're not going to be able to take any of the Sonnets or any of these other cars into really bad roads.
Right.
They'll be slightly better than a sedan for sure. With a sedan now, but the point is also this: the road qualities has improved enormously. If you go on a highway journey, the road quality has improved journey. So therefore, you don't really need an SUV. But SUV is basically a style statement. It says that you're younger at heart. It's more a vehicle for people who want to show themselves to be younger than they really are.
Right. It's not that SUVs have no utility. That utility is there, but yes, like Murad said, you really can't be taking an SUV, a sports utility vehicle, for adventure purposes unless it's specifically built for that. So a Thar or a Pajero or a lot of these new vehicles which are tailor-made for adventure. The subcompact SUVs, not so much. In the end, the choice would really depend on you, your requirements, your daily running costs, the size of your family, and how many times you actually take your car out on long highway journeys. Also, the traffic condition in your city, that plays a big role in it as well. So From this session, what I gather from all the questions that have been asked to us and the answers that Murad has so generously given, the first one was about insurance. Do your thorough, proper research, and if you're going in to renew your the insurance of your vehicle, then ensure that your car is spick and span as far as is possible. That's the best way to go about it. Then we had a question about changing the color of your car. Well, Murad thinks that it's not such a big problem. It's not very common these days either, but it shouldn't affect insurance or RC all that much anymore either. Right. Then we had the question, Murad, that was very interesting about aftermarket change in the manual gearbox to a semi-automatic gearbox. Murad is strictly against it. He says it's technically possible, but we'd rather you just go buy a car that's offered with a semi-automatic transmission to begin with, or just go in for an automatic transmission from so many of the OEMs that are giving it. Then we had a question about importing older vehicles. Well, that has definitely come down. You have so many of the high performance luxury cars that are being made in India or being brought into the country by the manufacturers themselves. So while it shouldn't be too much of an issue importing in a slightly older vehicle, it's a complicated route and can open itself to certain complications. Then we had the question about Teflon coating, anti-rust coating. You can't really go wrong with it. There is practical sense, and if you're living in cities like Bombay, Calcutta, Chennai, high humidity levels, we recommend that you do actually get those coatings done. At least, as Murad said, get the underbody coating done to protect your vehicle. Murad, did I sum up everything correctly?
I think you've done a damn good job.
All right. Murad, thank you for taking the time out, joining us for this session. Again, very insightful. Would also like to thank all our viewers, everyone who posted questions. Remember, we come live every Friday at this time, 5 o'clock on HT Auto. Do keep watching. For now, this is me signing off. Thank you so much.